Hey everyone, it's Kong, and here's the 4th issue of the Langrisser Lookout. This is a bi-weekly series where I present a mix of a community news roundup and a status update and progress report on my own account. My hope is that by giving you an inside look into the crude Stone Age tools that I have to work with, it'll help encourage you as you're building up your own box. At worst, it can serve as a soothing human voice to leave on for your dog while you're out at work. Anyway, let's start with the important stuff, so here's the news. In PvE news, it's one of those weeks where we get a big information dump from Chinese preview stuff. So there are 2 new characters coming out in China, which means we should be getting them in late October or so. And these are Helena and the tree sage Landius. Now, continuing in Zlong's latest trend of putting out characters who have a lot of interesting or weird terrain effects, both these characters do have terrain skills, or skills that affect the terrain. Helena's terrain skills, and actually some of her other skills as well, are fairly interesting because they introduce a new mechanic that disables opponents' equipment skills. So her 3C, for example, can target your opponent specifically to disable some aspect of their equipment. And her terrain effect means that any tile that she walks on, if the enemy goes there, it can disable some effect of their equipment as well. It'll be really interesting to see how this plays out in PvP, how much of a factor it is. I can see people trying to game it to disable things like Bracer Emblem or Swordsmith Medallion, but I think an interesting thing that top level players will have to figure out is how they can use it to disable weapon effects as well, because I think that'll be something that's a really interesting kind of new twist in high-level PvP. So Sage Landius, in addition to coming with the usual Landius kit, so Indomitable for example, he has the aura that reduces incoming damage for your allies around you. He's also the 2nd faction buffer for the Mythical Realm faction. So a lot of people who are really interested in the Mythical Realm faction and trying to run that faction, but aren't necessarily interested in trying to make Gizzeroff work for their teams, this guy's going to be a really interesting pick for their teams. So as I mentioned, he comes with his own slate of terrain effects. He has some AoE skills that when he blasts them out, it essentially creates a zone where enemy flyers and cavalry have reduced ability to move, whereas your own team members have an increased ability to move. So he can essentially be used to wall enemies. I can see this being extremely useful in PvE, for example, where the enemy AI won't necessarily know how to deal with this as well, and I can see them just kind of trying to go right into the terrain even though it's not going to work for them. Smart human opponents might be able to come up with other ways to mitigate this, but it's still going to be very annoying. So we also got a peek at the new Echo of Light skins for these 2 characters, and they look pretty cool. They are apparently Sengoku themed. So we have Sage Landius here looking like a monk, and Helena looking, I guess, like an Oni or samurai with her Naginata. So we also learned about 2 new pieces of unique gear. Narm is getting a helm that makes her talent cooldown 1 turn faster, which means it should always be available for use at 6 star. I know people who swear by Narm in Timeless Trials already, and this is just going to make her so much more useful for kiting enemies. The 2nd piece of unique gear is for Virash, and it's a suit of armor that gives him a random buff whenever he self-revives. We also learned about new 3-cost skills for Joshua, Sigma, and Farakia. Joshua's is a 3-line AoE that debuffs on crit and then teleports him to the end of the line and lets him move again. It's honestly not that compelling compared to the kit that he just comes with out of the box. So for that extra skill slot, I don't know if a lot of people will end up running it. Sigma's 3C is actually 2 rotating skills. One is a mark that he places on an enemy that lets him do 15% more damage to them the next time he hits them. After you use this, it then turns into a 1.5 times single target snipe skill, so the range for the hunter's mark is infinite, but it's not clear what the range for the snipe attack will be. And Farakia's is an interesting one that swaps her and her target's troop type, or unit type. So this doesn't change the actual troops, just the weapon triangle or class advantage and disadvantage. But I can see people already trying to scheme some fun combos involving turning tanky troops into demons and then blasting them with effective holy damage. It might just end up being kind of a meme approach, but it is different, so I'll give it that. So as I mentioned earlier, all this new stuff should make its way over to the global servers in late October. Now moving on to the PvP side, I mentioned in a short earlier promo video about an upcoming tournament being organized by Noob Pianist. Now, this is a small-scale invitational tournament, so unfortunately the window for people to actually join it is already closed. But I wanted to mention it because I do like to draw more attention for viewers to these kind of community-organized events. I do think there's an appetite for people to watch PvP in this game, and that extends beyond just the official Zlong Games run Apex Arena playoffs. So on that note, round robins for this tournament will start on June 13th. The round robin matches aren't going to be live streamed, but the matches are going to get uploaded to YouTube by Leo Smart as they conclude. And then when the tournament moves on to the single elimination phase, that's when they're going to start live streaming. So after releasing my promo for Noobs Invitational, a couple of people reached out to me on Discord and mentioned another tournament that's kind of being beta tested right now, and this one involves not using any SSR characters. Now, I know I've also seen some brainstorming on Reddit about potential interesting rule sets or limitations for future community tournaments, just to kind of mix things up and make the hardcore meta not as prevalent. So taking out kind of the top-tier ubiquitous characters like Zerida and Landius and Jugler and kind of forcing you to work with a more limited box to see the kind of creative approaches that come out. And it sounds like this R and SR tournament is a response to that, so it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out, and to see kind of future tournaments that get organized along the same lines. So finally, an update about the official Apex Arena playoffs. The field was carved down to a top 8 over the weekend, with these 8 players advancing. True God from Dalsis server, Chaton from Ellis City server, the Summit der Langrisser champ Method from Rocky Valley, and the Apex Season 1 champion Royley from Roga Valley. So congratulations to everyone who competed, and good luck to the victors next week. So that's it for the news, so let's move on to the Kong update for May 25th. I'll start with the summoning update, and it was actually a rough couple of weeks. First on the Wheeler, Gerald and Layla and Rainforce banner, I got Rainforce in 90 summons, and then it took me another 100 summons on top of that to get Wheeler. And that was my first pity roll in a while, so I guess I can't really complain. But then a week later, on the Zerida and Claret banner, I decided to summon for one SSR, no matter who it was, whether it was an off banner or whatever. Zerida shards would have helped me because I'm farming her up right now, and I didn't have Claret. I ended up getting Claret in 100 summons, which is back-to-back pities, which brings my lifetime summoning rate down to 1.92%. So that's below the 2% standard line. Essentially, 3 characters in almost 100 summons each. Definitely going to tank that rate, so hopefully my upcoming summons will help balance things out by being a little bit luckier. I also did summon on the equipment banner, and I don't know, I think I had fairly good luck on that one. I got all 4 pieces of new gear, 1 copy of each, and a bonus Reaper's Breath in something like 90 summons. I think for an equipment banner that's pretty close to the standard rate, but the fact that I got each thing is fine with me. Mainly what I wanted was the axe, so I'm good there. And before we get into the grind, I'll just give a quick note about my awakening progress. I didn't unlock any new 3C skills this time around, but I did do the first step awakening for Chris to help with Hugin and Munin. So she was able to bring Mass Protect and Mass Attack and Dispel for me because she's also fully ruined. I also did the first step awakening for Liana just because I always use her and I don't know why I didn't have her awakened yet. So let's move on to the grind. This is where I talk about my 5 Gs, my goals, my gear, my gates, my grunts, and my group. So for my goals, which is really what I'm working towards right now, the main PvE things that I had left are cracking the level 70 Eternal Temples, and from last time, getting an S rank on Hugin and Munin so I can then consider changing Matthew's class. So I do have an update on that front at least. I took a few stabs at Hugin and Munin, running 6-star Archer Matthew, 5-star Narm, 6-star Landius with no attack bonds, thanks Rachel, 6-star Chris with no center heart bond, 6-star Liana, and 4-star Tiaras with no Jugler plushie. I was able to improve my score from my initial 500,000 D+ run to a 2.4 million and then 2.8 million. Then I went back and made some tweaks and finally landed somewhere in the mid 4 million range to get the S rank. I was also able to go back in and get all the achievements, so I don't need to think about H&M ever again if I so choose. I'm still ruminating on what I'm going to do with Matthew just because I kind of really like him as an archer, so I haven't committed to that yet. So I think my next target is probably going to be Phoenix, since I do have most of the protagonist puzzle pieces required to make that work already. Honestly, I simply haven't set aside the time to give it a serious shot since the level 70 was released. So I'm just going to have to dive in and figure out what tweaks I need to make, and who I need to power up a bit, and then take it from there. So let's move on to my gear. Unfortunately, there's not much worth mentioning from the gambles or from the event over the last 2 weeks for me, but there were 2 things of note. I got my first copy of Aeolus Battle Armor from one of the gambles in the first week. I also got, if I can find it here, my first Dragon Slayer Grom from Dragon Sweeps in the second week, so that's going to be for Landius. And then finally, this doesn't count as luck or RNG, but I bought Jugler's Gift from the Secret Realm shop in anticipation of summoning him next week. So, moving on to my gates. Zerida hit 5 stars over the last phase, and Deedlit also hit 4 stars, which kind of ridiculously puts her in the upper echelons of my character's power levels, but that's Deedlit, I guess. And Tiaras should be hitting 5 stars later this week. So, one thing I'm planning on doing is parking Zerida for a couple weeks while I farm 50 shards for my new Claret, just to have some stock saved up for the free Sigma that I should be entitled to on the Valentine's banners when they come around in July. So I'm missing both Lanford and Knight of Mystery, so my plan is to summon for basically anyone on that banner, and then use the trade-in item to swipe a free Sigma from the other banner. Hopefully that is a sound plan. Now moving on to my grunts. I did take the balanced approach that I mentioned in the last issue, and I raised everyone's troop levels, the HP and defense cores, up to 40%, just to even everything off. So that didn't take me as long as I expected, so what I did is I also went back in and maxed out my lobster behemoths, and I did a little bit of extra work on the flying aqua defense and attack cores, again in anticipation of getting Jugler next week. So I'm kind of putting all my eggs in Jugler's basket right now. And now that that's done, I think I'm just planning on continuing to chip away at my cavalry and flyer attack levels, just to bring them up closer to 70. So that'll definitely take me the next couple weeks, probably a bit longer than that, now that I'm in kind of the final stretch of their attack cores. And I'll probably toss a few resources at Steel Wings as well, to have them in better shape for when Ares comes around, since they're just at their basic level 5 right now. And finally onto my group. So I finally bothered to max Matthew's bonds, well, functionally max, since I haven't really had time to do the Time Rift level 14 yet for the new spirits. So I haven't been able to get attack and defense bonds up to level 10 yet, but I got Matthew up as high as I can get him. I also finished Deedlit's Heart Bond, getting her to 96 as well. And another thing I did, which is probably kind of silly, but it ended up being helpful, is I maxed out all of Chris's bonds except for the center heart. So again, I did that to help me with H&M, and it worked, so I guess it was worth it. Obviously my next step in here I think is going to be just maxing out Jugler as soon as I get him, which won't be too bad considering I have all kinds of guild points and gold. So with the 5Gs out of the way, that's going to be it for the Kong update, and that's going to be it for this issue of the Langrisser Lookout. So thanks for watching, and thanks as always for all your feedback and advice in the comments. Stay tuned for the next episode of Should You Summon later this week, and then I'll catch you in the next Langrisser Lookout.